Hello, so this video is going to go through how you can revise for GCSE language and literature with a focus on both exams. Obviously, we're doing this at the start of the year, so we're looking ahead to the trial exams later on, and then also the GCSEs themselves, because the process is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is that you'll hopefully know a little bit more about the texts that we're studying or the skills you need to do for the language exams between now and the summer as well. So we'll have a little look through both GCSEs in turn. So first of all, the key dates then for 2024, for summer 2024. We'll do English language first. So English language paper 1, we know that is going to be on Thursday the 23rd of May in the morning. That's an hour and 45 minutes long. And we know that language paper 2 is going to be on Thursday the 6th of June, also an hour and 45 minutes. Both exams are in the morning, as are the two literature ones as well. The other element that you should have done in class is the spoken language assessment, where you will be given a pass, merit or distinction grade by your teacher, who will listen to you do a presentation on a couple of things. That's done. That counts as a separate standalone qualification, so you get a pass, merit or distinction, but that doesn't count towards the marks there for English language. And the other thing for English language, 50% of the marks are on paper 1, 50% on paper 2, so 80 total mark out of 80 for both papers, 160 in total. And again, it's split up across the sections. Section A is worth 40 marks. Section B, the writing section, is worth 40 marks, and the same for paper 2. For literature, slightly different. Obviously, you've got literature paper 1 will be on Monday the 13th of May. That will be one of the earliest exams that you do. This is 64 marks for paper 1, and it's Macbeth and Frankenstein. And then for paper 2, which is on Monday the 20th of May in the morning, 2-hour 15-minute exam, Inspector Calls, Power and Conflict Poetry, Unseen Poetry question 1, where you analyse one poem out of 24 marks, and then question 2, where you compare a theme or an idea in both poems and their methods they use, which is worth 8 marks there as well. So we've gone for the kind of colouring of language of blue and literature as orange. They are two different GCSEs. When you get your GCSE results in English, you'll get a language grade, you'll get a literature grade. They might be the same number, they might be two different numbers, quite often though they can be. And you'll also get a pass, merit and distinction for spoken language as well, depending on the mark that you've been given by your teacher there as well. So in terms of revision then, there's a couple of things. We're going to focus on language first, and we'll do literature in a minute. What we'll do is we'll share this PowerPoint with you, so you've got access to this, because what you can do is use this as a checklist to tick off these various bits and pieces as you go through. We've broken it up into 3 stages. And the first stage is the fundamental knowledge. So this is what we want you to know, the absolute basics that you must know to do your GCSEs. And obviously this is things like how to answer the questions. So for language, it's questions 1 to 4, the reading questions, and then question 5, the longer writing question, how long you should spend on each question, what you're going to actually have to do, how many texts you have to look at, where you get your information from, and obviously little things like the ability to write for 35 minutes, the ability to write for the majority of the time. How do you know if you've completed this stage? Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. Can you explain how to answer the questions? Can you practice your speed reading of 2 articles in 15 minutes? Can you write for half an hour? And this is places where you can go. So there's YouTube videos, Mr. Bruff revision videos. There's things on our English department intranet site. There's things that teachers will put on Teams that we can put on Teams for you if you're struggling to access that. So you should really have that. I mean, to be honest, you've probably got this in class by now because you practice everything in class. You've done trial exams. But this will be a case of just making sure that you know what to do for each one. Then stage 2 is developing your understanding. So this is looking at each of the questions in turn and what you have to do. So for instance, for language paper 1, question 3, you have to analyse structure, beginning, middle and end in each thing, in each section. For paper 2, question 4, you have to compare and analyse writers' attitudes. So you need to know what you do in each question, not just how you answer it, but what you do and how do you do that to a high standard. And here's some ways to help you with that as well. And one of the things we get you to do is make revision materials on the strategies and skills you'll need for each question. And then it's about practice. So yes, we give you've done trial exams at the end of year 10, start of year 11, and again in year 11. But can you find any past paper questions, some of the mini mocks there as well? Can you be practicing and practicing and practicing those skills so that when you do the exam in late May or in early June, then you'll have all the skills that you need to do well. And finally, once you've done all this, once you kind of know what to do in detail, it's just practice, practice, practice. And it's not just practice, it's practice in time conditions. So if you've got 15 minutes reading and planning time to read through and annotate the sources you're going to be doing for paper 1 or paper 2, do that. Time yourself 15 minutes, go. If you'd have 10 minutes to write an answer to language paper 1 question 2, time 10 minutes and practice that writing and complete whole sections of past papers. It's not enough to know what to do. This is now about doing it in the time you've allocated. So write answers to past paper questions. We have kept some of them behind and we will give you them all back once you've done your final set of trial exams there. And use student-friendly mark schemes to self-assess your work to check the bits that you think you're getting as well. It's a similar sort of thing for literature, but obviously there's a little bit more to know for literature. So first of all is the fundamental knowledge, which say get done by the end of January, which is what happens in Macbeth, Frankenstein and Inspector Calls. Who are the key characters? What are the key events and the key themes of the power and what are they about, basically, the power and conflict poems, and what are the key themes in there, and what do you have to do for the unseen poetry questions for question 1 and question 2? Can you answer all these questions then about the plot? What happens? What's the story of these things? Who are the main characters? And if you can't, there are loads of plot summaries online. There are loads of revision materials on our department intranet site and on Teams. They take, just a word of caution on this, they take quite a lot of time, but there are film versions of Macbeth, Frankenstein, and Inspector Calls. If you know you've missed a couple of lessons and you've missed Act 5 of Macbeth, so you don't know what happens at the end of Macbeth, on the school system, which you can access remotely, you can watch a stage version of Act 5 of Macbeth, so you can watch all that there. The CGP revision guides, they're the revision guides we recommend you get. They're excellent for helping fill in gaps of plot. They've got characters, they've got character pages, they've got kind of storybooks. There are Flipscope cue cards as well. There are all sorts of things you can do to fill in any gaps you've got in the fundamental knowledge you need. Because before you can start to analyse these characters, you need to know who the main characters are and what happens in the beginning, middle and end of all the texts we've studied. So the next stage then is to develop your understanding. So that's the key themes in Macbeth, Frankenstein and Inspector Calls. That's you kind of thinking, right, okay, in Macbeth, they might ask me about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, the two main characters, but they could also ask me about ambition. So what would I do? How would I answer a question on ambition? Who would I talk about? 6 or 7 power and conflict poems in depth. You need to know what all 15 power and conflict poems are about. So that at that level, that would be the case of, right, okay, I know that Extract from the Prelude is the one where he rows the boat, he sees the mountain, and it traumatizes him for the rest of his life. So you need to know what they're all about to that depth, because in the exam, they will give you one of the power and conflict poems. And to really, really prepare yourself well, you might get a poem that asks you to talk about power or conflict, which means you could, in theory, talk about any poem. So, for instance, if in the exam you got tissue as the poem you were given, and the question says, how are ideas about power shown in tissue? You could talk about any other poem to go with tissue. And you might not particularly like tissue, but you've got a copy of tissue in the exam in front of you, or whatever poem is, and you pick a second poem to compare that to. We think, as a rule of thumb, you should probably learn 2 to 3 about war, 2 to 3 about man or personal power, the power of people, 2 to 3 about nature, and Kamikaze is a really useful one. Kamikaze's never come up as the name poem, and Kamikaze obviously deals with war. It deals with personal power because the pilot has the power to end his mission, but in so doing, he brings shame to his family. It deals with nature because it's the beautiful imagery of rural Japan that causes him to come back. So Kamikaze is a really, really good one. So we'd get you to revise 6 in depth. And when we're talking about in depth, what happens at the beginning, what happens at the middle, what happens at the end, and a quotation for each of those sections. And of course, then how do you answer the unseen question? So to do this, and this is probably going to take you quite a lot of time, it might be slightly after February 2024, can you make essay plans on key characters? So that would be, if I got a question on Lady Macbeth, or Lady Macbeth, this is what I'm going to say, beginning, middle and end. And so when you get into your GCSE literature exam, you might have a question on ambition, but the extract might be Lady Macbeth. So you know you're actually going to use that essay plan. You're tailoring your essay plan to meet the question. So we'd get you to make them on key characters and themes in Macbeth. So let's say side of A4 or a cue card some students often use on Macbeth. Cue card on Lady Macbeth with the quotations you're going to use, the context you're going to say. And do that for the characters in Macbeth, Frankenstein, Victor and the Creature are the two main ones there, and an Inspector Calls. Make an essay plan comparing how the themes are presented in power and conflict poems. So the 6 poems that you're going to talk about, obviously you need to know what all 15 are about. That's why we have our jigsaws of knowledge where you fill in, right, this one's about this. But which 6 are you going to go into depth about? And include context and wider ideas in your essay plan. So just making sure you're talking about those big ideas in the world. You're not talking about the creature as if it's a real person, it's a character. So what features does it represent? What contextual features? And then exactly the same for language. Your exams are in May. They're very, very early this year, the exams. So you've got about 5 months of past paper questions using all these essay plans that you've learned to basically try and answer any question you're going to get. Because we don't know the question you're going to get, but we know it's going to be about the characters or themes in these texts. So what you're doing is using the essay plans you've written, using the quotations you've revised, using the context you're going to say, and making that fit an essay plan. Again, there's just a short breakdown of the 2 questions. So in terms of revision for English language, we get you to make an essential knowledge sheet, a jigsaw of knowledge, basically something that records what you've got to do for each of the questions. So what do you do for question 1 on paper 1? How long should you spend? That's your revision for language. You need to go into that exam knowing, right, I spend 15 minutes reading and planning. So I spend 15 minutes looking at the questions, highlighting the source. I spend 5 minutes on question 1, which is the 4-fact retrieval. Question 2, I spend 10 minutes. It's worth 8 marks. What do I do to get my 8 marks? It's language analysis. I pick out 2 to 3 quotations from the little box I'm given, and I analyse them in depth. What does language analysis mean? What can I talk about? So you do that for every single question. So you might have a big side of A3 paper, where for paper 1, you've got all your strategies for each question, and the same for paper 2. For literature, it's a little bit more complicated. There's the breakdown of the exam. Remember, obviously, what we're going to get you to do is make essential knowledge sheet for each major character in Frankenstein and Macbeth. So I would probably get you to think about Victor Frankenstein, the creature. I'd get you to think about Macbeth, Lady Macbeth. You may want to consider characters like the witches as one character, Macduff as a character, Malcolm as a character, Duncan as a character. Potentially there's a few more in Macbeth. Inspector Calls, you also need to do that. So for Inspector Calls, you've got the main characters there, which is the Burling family. You've got Gerald Croft, and you have got the Inspector as a character too. You've also technically got Eva Smith, but you can talk about her in relation to the other characters. And then 6 or 7 of the poems. And for each of those things, I would get you to think about 3 or 4 quotations that you're going to analyse, the best 3 or 4 quotations to talk about that character. We have got some examples that we can give you. I've put together a load of essay plans that I can give you, but it's better coming from you because obviously you're going to be using these in your exams. And then we've got a couple of tips for revision here. This is just generally, so we're not just talking about English here. We fit into your revision, whether it's for your trial exams or your actual exams. The first thing we get you to do is make a revision timetable. We've got a blank example, but it's on the next slide. You've got to be realistic, and it's different for different people. When I was revising for my GCSE, for instance, I had a part-time job. I worked as a paper boy back in the day. So I would be, before school, for instance, I knew I'd get up late. I knew I wouldn't be able to do any revision because I'd be doing my paper round. Some weekends I'd have to do that as well. I also had a season ticket for the best football team in the world. So I had to go and see them every other Saturday. So I knew then I'd be leaving home about 1 o'clock, getting to the ground, and then obviously I wouldn't be back home until 5 o'clock. Some of you have got part-time jobs, you've got family commitments, you've got other bits and pieces you've got to do. And also you've got to kind of take it 1 week at a time, because obviously what happens is as you get close to the exams, you might have done, all your English work, let's say. So you don't need to worry about revising English, you've finished the qualification. Some of you might have exams early on for some subjects where you finish, you don't need to worry about revising for that. Or it might be that, you give up your part-time job to focus on your exams. So just bear that in mind as you go through. You can't just kind of say, I'm going to revise 5 o'clock till 10 o'clock every single night, because obviously that's probably not going to happen. One of the things we also get you to do is look at using what's called the Pomodoro method for revising. I use this for my GCSEs, for my A-levels, for university level exams, and it works. You break your revision up into 30-minute sessions. So you focus on one topic for each 30-minute session. So it might be, for English, you might have a half-hour revision sessions on Macbeth. But within that, you're just going to look at Lady Macbeth within that half an hour session. And what you do is you work for 25 minutes, solid work, get your watch, get a clock, time yourself, and then have a break for 5 minutes. And after you've done 4 of these 25-minute blocks, give yourself a slightly longer break. So it might be, you do 25 minutes on Lady Macbeth, then you might do 25 minutes on language paper 1, question 5. It might be you do 25 minutes on a topic from maths. It might be you do 25 minutes on a topic from languages. And then after those 4 blocks, you give yourself a break for about an hour, and then you do 4 25-minute blocks later on. Obviously, it's quite hard when you're in school. At weekends, you've got slightly longer, so you can spend a bit longer doing this. There's a limited amount of time in the evening there. But that's just a rough rule of thumb. So break your revision up into half an hour sessions. Because if you're going to say, right, I'm going to do 2 hours Macbeth revision, you're probably going to find your attention span starts to wane after about 25 minutes is the average person's attention span. So it'll start to go. And actually, 25 minutes will be great, but the other hour and 35 minutes won't be. Lots of students worry about remembering quotations for literature. I think you've probably got quite a lot of quotations you know already. The other thing I think is there's about 330 people in the year group. Everyone can remember different quotations and still get the right answer. People do that annoying thing before or after exams where they're trying to remember all the quotations they've learned. And then obviously you might be sat next to one of your best friends who's learned different quotations to you. And you're like, oh no, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to fail. You're not. Everyone can do different quotations. And the other thing is they're relatively straightforward to learn. One of the ways we do is to get them to write them down, repeat them, and test yourself regularly on them. So, oh, full of scorpions is my mind, let's say. That's my quotation I want to learn. So I'd write that down. Oh, full of scorpions is my mind. And I'd cover it up. Oh, full of scorpions is my mind. I'd try and read it to myself. I'd get a family member or a friend to test me on that as well. You'll probably find you've got quite a lot of them already in your working memory because you've used them in year 10 and 11. Keep them short as well. Keep them to 1 or 2 key words that you're going to focus on, because that allows you to integrate them into your analysis, which is a skill in itself. So lots of students worry about remembering quotations like they're magically going to fall out of your head. They really, really aren't. Because if you can learn song lyrics, you can learn quotations. There used to be a TV program when I was younger called The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I used to watch it every single day. And the reason I know the theme tune to that song, I don't really want to, is because I've listened to it that many times that it's become stuck in my long-term memory. It's important to learn quotations. It's also important to discuss key moments in the play. So things like the ring in Inspector Calls being a significant device is as important as any quotation you can talk about. And you've got to be able to analyse words from them or structure from them in detail for marks. It's not, lots of students learn really, really good quotations, but if you can't do anything with your quotations, it defeats the object of learning in the first place. And the other thing is just make sure you're reading the questions before you read the extract or the source for language or literature. Make sure you're doing that first of all, because what that means is you're reading the extract with a focus on the words in the question rather than wasting time just reading. So for language in particular, if you spend the first 15 minutes of the exams just reading source A and source B for paper 2, you've not done well, because what you should do is look at the questions, look at question 1, look at question 2, look at question 3, look at question 4. What bits of the source do they say to focus on, and what specific things do they say to focus on? So make sure you're reading the questions first for language and literature, and then go back and read any bits and pieces you're given, whether it's sources for language or whether it's an extract from Macbeth and Frankenstein and the poem that you get given for Power and Conflict Poetry and the unseen poems there as well. We've got an example of a kind of a timetable. So obviously if you're in school, This will be slightly different for April. So in Easter time, obviously, you're not in school there, so that's quite a good time to do some revision. It's different for different people. Some of you might have things like football training. So obviously, if you've got football training, you might only be able to do an hour's worth of revision. There's no right or wrong answer to this as well. Some people here, 1, 2, 3, 4, doing 4 hours of revision a night, you might get burnt out by doing that. Some of you might be able to do that quite comfortably. So just balance that. Things like meeting friends as well. Keep these commitments, have them as little rewards to yourself. If you've done a full week's revision, then that's absolutely fine. If you've got a season ticket to see your football team lose every week, go to that because it's a commitment, but do your revision around that as well. Maybe get up a little bit earlier, revise a little bit later. But obviously, it's about putting those in place. And remember, using that Pomodoro method, half an hour on each thing and breaking that down into specific topics there to allow you to focus in detail. And remember, do it a week at a time because it will change every week, won't it? This is different to what it will look like in half term or the Easter holidays. And we recommend, as you've seen, that you should kind of probably be starting to revise now. And that's kind of filling in the gaps in your knowledge between now and the end of January, and then using February to develop that knowledge, to build your essay plans for literature, to know what you've got to do for each of the questions for language. And then from kind of March onwards, particularly things like Easter holiday, that's practice, 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 practice. So that might be here, for instance, you might spend half an hour having a go at writing a Lady Macbeth question. Or it might be you spend half an hour doing a language paper 1, section A, questions 1, 2, 3, 4. But this is what works. Planning your time, making sure you're going through those stages of revision and making sure you're allocating the time to do the revision will have a massive, massive impact on your grades as you go forward.